Good morning. I will now call to order the Monday, September 18th, 2023 regular town council meeting. If you would please stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, up first on the agenda, actually, Amy, do we need to do a roll call since we have members online?
Yes, we do.
Perfect.
Okay,
If you would, please go ahead and do that.
okay. President Plunkett,
Here.
Vice President Burke,
Here.
Councillor Choi is not present. Councillor Culp. Okay, not present. Councillor Garrett,
I'm here.
and Councillor Garrett is present via Zoom. Councillor Melton,
Here.
Councillor Trailer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so because we have an online participant, our rules require individual votes. So just a heads up from council, we'll be going through roll call votes on everything. Up first is the approval of the memorandum of the August 21st, 2023 budget workshop. A copy has been posted. Are there any questions from councilors? I will make a motion to approve the memoranda.
Second.
First by President Plunkett, second by Vice President Burke.
President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Councillor Choi is not present. Councillor Culp, not present. Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Melton,
Yes.
Councillor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank
Motion
you.
passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. At this point, I would, Amy, do I just read Alex in since he's here now?
Oh. Yes,
Note for record of the meeting that Alex is present.
yeah, for record of the meeting, Councillor Choi has arrived at the meeting.
All right. Up next is the approval of the September 5th, 2023 regular meeting. A copy has also been posted for that memoranda as well. Are there any questions from council? I'll make a motion to approve that as well.
Second.
Second by Councilor Trailer. Amy, if you would, please.
Yes. President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Councillor Choi,
Yes.
thank you. Councillor Culp is not present. Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Melton,
Yes.
Councillor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of the September 18th, 2023 claims. Are there any questions from councilors? We have Cindy here if we have anything. I'll make a motion to approve claims.
Second.
A second by Vice President Burke.
President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke.
Yes.
Councillor Choi,
Yes.
Councillor Culp is not present. Councillor Garrett,
Yes.
Councillor Melton,
Yes.
Councillor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a request to speak on agenda items. Amy, do we have any requests to speak?
No, we do not.
Up next would be Mayor Administration Update, and we did not receive an update there either. So moving on to council update. Are there any updates from councilors? All right, moving on to the first item of old business. This is a consideration of the 2024 budget for the town of Zionsville. This is ordinance 2023-20. This is a first reading. And we have Deputy Mayor Burkell, Tim Berry from Crow, and then Councilor Garrett will also follow up with some of that when they're done.
Morning.
Morning.
Morning, Deputy Mayor Piquel. 2024 budget process was started by providing the council with a budget that contained all wants, needs. We went to the 821 budget workshop with everything on the budget for council to look at and review, as well as the administration. 2 rounds of cuts beyond that, and this budget is what's in front of you. A quick reflection. Personnel needs. Fire, currently we have 3 firefighters, 3 firefighter number 2s, 1 administrative trading captain in that budget. Police, we have 2 patrolmen. DPW, we have 1 inspector and 1 street technician. In parks, we have 2 maintenance technicians. In human resources, we have 1 administrator. In finance, we have an account asset administrator. In planning, we have 1 planner. In IT, we have 0. To go back, this salary also includes a 7% salary increase. It includes a 2% increase in the 401A match, increasing from 3 to 5%. The first version of the budget reflected a $12.3 million deficit. We've been able to decrease the deficit by a half, down to $5.9 million. The town has healthy fund balances due to the savings in the for capital projects. The focus has been to make sure that the deficit is not made up of recurring costs, but one-time expenses, and we've tried our best to try and meet that. Revenue totals include the estimated amount for receiving the excess levy appeal for the rural to urban and general levy appeal. Some quick notes. There is, I'll save that point. Do you have any questions for me?
Deputy Mayor Piquel, I appreciate all the hard work that everyone has put into this, and we got that Friday night, so we've been able to dive in on the weekend, and I'll go through some points here in a bit. One question I have, though, the request for an additional finance resource, I was unable to see where that's placed, because as I look at the 2024 budget request for the finance department, personal services is only going up about $20,000, which I assume was in relation to the proposed 7% pay increase, but I did not see that additional salary recognized somewhere. Is it somewhere else that I'm missing?
Actually, and I'm going to invite Director of Finance Joe Keel up to walk this with me, but it's my understanding the employee was a part-time employee this year.
That's HR. I'm talking about finance.
I'm sorry. Finance. Thank you.
No problem.
Cindy Poor, Director of Finance and Records. The reason for that, Josh, I dove into that after the workshop. We actually had a position in for the 23, and Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, the 23 budget, we were considering a procurement person, and that didn't happen. And so there was just a little bit of change since that was in the 23 budget for next year, since that position didn't get filled. That's the reason why there's not much of a difference between the budgets from this year and next year.
Thanks, Cindy. That explains that.
You're welcome.
Further questions?
I'm just curious because I think at the last meeting, if I recall correctly, we brought the salary increase back down to 4%, and now we're back up to 7%. I'm just curious the thought process that.
I can easily explain that. The revised budget from the 21st to the 5th to our meeting on the 5th came in with a 4% increase and a dropped 2% 401A. I'll be honest, I missed that until the budget was presented. I even had a conversation with Tim Berry about this. And we talked about the 4%, but it did not register with me. So I apologize. That's why the 7% is back, because that was our intention the entire time. Through a busy, robust budget season, I did miss that. So I apologize.
It was a, and thanks for putting that back in. It was a pretty big chunk of the revenue though, or the expense. What were the primary, was that primarily balanced by just cutting back on new positions to balance, to get that 3% back in? Was that your strategy to kind of?
Well, I mean, honestly, the first budget that we presented is what we need. It's honestly what we need as a town. It's not reasonable to expect that we're going to get those things, but that's actually what we need. This is what our department heads have requested. I trust their professional opinions. Our finance council has been excellent at trying to keep us with a realistic view at what we're trying to do. The employee cuts were a difficult choice. And in fact, I think it became a point where once everybody saw the need to draw back, every single department had stepped in to find that measure that we could get to include the 7% raise and the 2% increase to keep us within that range of $5.5 to $6 million, as we had talked earlier.
Hey, Deputy Mayor Raquel, I just want to talk semantics real quick because you mentioned employee cuts. I just want to make sure everyone watching realizes you were talking about cutting of future employees. There is no mention in any budget of cutting current employees. I know you know that. I just want to make sure everyone is.
Yes, sir.
Is on the
I
same
appreciate
page.
that. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
I think the biggest question I have, Deputy Mayor Patel, is do you believe this is a sustainable budget? Do you believe, is this last time, in the last meeting, we had a presentation, we were 8 million and change over, and we said, is this a budget you would recommend we pass? And you and Tim Berry both said no, and that it wasn't sustainable. Do you guys anticipate that this is a sustainable budget moving forward?
I think there's probably, if it came down to it, to be honest, the police, I would have preferred to have 4 police officers hired, because the plan that was brought to us to enact that actually seemed more than reasonable and actually helpful to not only staffing problems that we have, but community policing on a normal basis with officers that are in and out in regular hours. It actually shortens the variance that the officers have. So we have coverage every single day. That's something that I'm disappointed that we can't put in there, but the police made no hesitation to say we can step back. We're in their 5-year plan and holding with 2 officers. It would have been nice to advance that for a year, but we understand that the limitations are there, and that's what we're stuck with. Also in DPW, the director removed almost every piece of new equipment that he needs. That's going to be helpful for him to continue to serve not only the new sections of town, but to maintain the level of service that we have all grown accustomed to receive. In fact, some of the machinery that he has would have actually lowered the number of bodies that have to be involved in leaf collecting and those things. That's a savings that's somewhat calculated in, but it's not actually calculated in. So as far as sustainable now, I believe so. I think we could probably do some some maneuvering. If that's what you're looking for, if you're feeling like you need to offer some advice in different areas, we're absolutely willing to talk to you about that and work with the council.
Just with regards to the cut to salaries, or not to salary, excuse me, to the increase, the 7 down to the 4, we just aren't going to do it now because you didn't include that? Is that, I guess I misunderstood.
It was added back in.
So you added back up to the 7% again. Okay. So I just wanted to be clear on that because, you know, that was a major request that we put in to try and make the budget as close to balance as possible. You know, after being on the council the last few years, you know, I feel like finance department obviously really needs help. And, you know, the planning department, we're going to be hit with all these things coming at us, all these developments. We've got the Bradley, we've got all these controversial things coming. We need to help those departments out for sure. You know, we have police and fire. I think we personally have a great police and fire department that is not fully staffed to where we want to be to meet other municipalities and to meet that local, to match kind of the other municipalities or even across the country. But I think that as we look at this budget, it's really important to me that we work within our budget, but we also look to the departments that are going to be able to finance and plan the future for Zionsville. And, you know, we've got planning and finance right here. Those two are like our most important to me because we've had such great public safety over the last few years, at least while I've been witnessed here on the council. So with respect to the salaries, I'm just kind of frustrated that we didn't get that included into this budget as we move forward. But I know you're talking about equipment and other employees with DPW. Those things, those pieces of equipment can be brought to us later throughout the year for requests, right? Is that something they can do outside of, I mean, if we need a piece of equipment, you're not saying that we can't give them a piece of equipment at all. We're just asking them to come back throughout the year. Is that
not at all? My point was to direct that this equipment isn't like really a want, you know, it's something that we need. It's something that we need to maintain the high level that our residents expect in this community.
I don't want it to come across that we can't get it.
No, sir.
Our goal is to get to the balanced budget
Absolutely.
as close as we can. And then coming back throughout the year for things that we really need. The only thing that we're going to miss out on, I believe, is the savings on the sale if we were to order that equipment now or have that, you know, ordered now. So I just want to make sure that it's clear that, you know, if we need equipment, we're going to do what we need to get that equipment to DPW. And I stand behind that, just like we did in the past when we asked for everybody to trim their budgets and come to us and let us know if you have a need throughout the year as well. And I think that's more important because it comes to the forefront as like, hey, we're buying this new vac truck or whatever that item is. Then the public knows that it's coming and we see it, we hear you, and we're going to serve you to that highest level of service that we can.
Just to clear up a little bit of maybe confusion here. I think the goal of the administration is presenting a holistic budget for next year, not something like in the past we have left things out but quite frankly I'd be the first one to say I'm kind of pleasantly surprised, but this has been so far the smoothest budget process we've been through so far. But I think with that, the goal is present a holistic budget, not something we have to come back and ask for additional appropriations for later. Because quite frankly, if that's the plan, we're
Over budget.
We're over budget. We're significantly more over budget than what we see here.
And to be clear, I trust Director Lance implicitly that if he pulled that out of his budget, he was going to survive. So I'm just making a point that we have these things in the budget, not because they are just superfluous wants, they are needs that we have to have in this community.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
There are the things that, for example, that Chief Bank Order asked for as far as, putting together 4 firefighters per apparatus. And in looking at the communities around us, Carmel, Fisher, Lebanon, Douglasville, Westfield, Whitestown, what we've discovered are things like it varies from community to community, whether it's 3 per apparatus or 4 per apparatus, and sometimes they have a mixture of both. I'd like for those instances when we want to meet community standards or the standards set by the state firefighters associations, those kind of things, whether it deals with public safety on the fire side or the police side, we want to eventually reach. I think what we try to do this year may have been too aggressive. And if we can get to 4 firefighters per apparatus over a period of time, instead of trying to get there all at once, that may be something that we plan for as we go down the road. Same on the police department, if we're getting to a certain point that we step it instead of trying to do everything all in 1 year. That was the challenge for us on the firefighter side, at 115 miles an hour with 1,219 firefighters. To get to that 4, there are a number of communities that, including us, that would like to meet the standards set forth. As we look at this, we shouldn't just look at what we're attacking in 2024, but what we have as a goal for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years down the road. And to try to get to what the fire chief, what Chief Bank Order wanted in 1 year may have been difficult, but I don't think it's out of reach, say, several years from now. And then we also, which obviously, as we've all talked about in the past, we've got the 3 firefighters that are coming out of the grant in a couple of years that we have to figure out how to pay for.
And that's 6.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Right. And that is certainly weighing on our minds as well, because that will be, unless we prepare for it, it's going to be a shock to the system. We have to prepare for that. So, and I feel like the fire department has done a great job of setting themselves up, planning for the future. They are now in serious mode of planning a future of the fire department and what that leadership looks like, and growing the department within. So, well, I understand completely that 3 firefighters and a new captain is a big lift. The chief has also, we have in conversations, he's also understanding of where we are at on this budget. He's as realistic as anybody else in our departments to understanding what we have to work with. So,
President Plunkett, if you would, and councilors allow me, I've really dug into this budget. I would like to go through some thoughts I have via a presentation that may help guide some of this conversation. Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah,
Right.
Joe, do you have whatever Alex needs, or
I got it.
Good.
Yeah, I got it. But you guys should be seeing 2024 budget discussion up there. Just as a little background, President Plunkett tasked Councilor Choi and I for diving into the budget. I agree a lot with what Deputy Mayor Patel has said in terms of, I think what has been presented to us are needs and wants. I know our department heads, I don't think they're asking for frivolous things. But at the same token, we, as every other community, as every other household, has to live within our means. If you sort of think through these budget iterations, and I just want to put this up so that everyone is seeing here, Deputy Mayor talked about the initial budget, the $12 million deficit. You will see in the second round there were cuts. There were cuts of about $1.2 million. There was also additional revenue found, which really helped bring down that deficit. Some additional revenue sources that were identified, and we're now on this third round here. There was further revenue found. From what I could tell, this was some additional CCI income and $90,000 that was more in the parks. And you can see that expenses were cut a further, $1.5 million. We are still at a $6 million deficit. I put a quote up here from Deputy Mayor Patel mentioning that we have unappropriated balances of almost $70 million. That's a bit of he was not doing this intentionally, but that's a bit of a statement that doesn't sort of ring true, because if you look at, if we pass this current balance, this current budget, our ending balance would be around $23.9 million. So if we were starting with 68 million and we had a $6 million deficit, you think we'd be ending with $62 million. But a lot of those dollars are already identified and will be used. And so, in my opinion, this is not a sustainable budget. I wanted to show just some, and these are numbers from Crow, of how much our budgets have grown here in the last few years. So you can see that our revenue is up, roughly 14%. Per this budget, our expenses are up relative to 2022 of almost 49%. Capital outlays are up over 250%. You can see individual departments there that are up very large percentages. We're certainly a growing town. There's additional needs, but revenues are not keeping up with this. And so I just wanted to point this out, that even though these are needs, these expenses are growing very, very quickly, and many of these are what I would consider sustained expenses, which contribute to a consistent budget deficit. This also assumes, and Deputy Mayor Patel did mention this, that we are going to win the property tax appeal of roughly $850,000. I think that is a bit of a dangerous assumption based on feedback that I have gotten, not about our specific appeal, but just appeals in general. And if we don't, that further puts this budget into deficit. So just for comparison, and again, another budget through Westfield just came through last week. I just sort of wanted to show, Westfield's proposing a $35 million budget. We're proposing here a $50 million budget. You can see the spend per resident is 128% higher than what Westfield is proposing. And our population number here includes both the urban and rural service districts. And as we know, some of our departments, mainly police and roads, don't even service those rural service districts, where Westfield doesn't have that distinction. So, we are a high touch community. It's nothing wrong with high services, but we have to have the revenue to support that. And I don't think we do. Deputy Mayor Patel went over the administration highlights that were given to us. The employee raise that was 7% from the 4% we saw last time, and he explained that. The 2% increase in the 401B match, the employees are being requested. There is some money that is being cut from some areas and just being moved to other areas. And there's nothing wrong with that, but just something that I noticed as we were looking through that. At what I have had to do, I don't have the Crow budgeting system. All I had was PDFs that were sent to us on a Friday night. So I basically had to recreate the budget on my own Excel spreadsheets, which that was a fun exercise. This has been a bit of a long project over the weekend. This is what I am proposing. This is what I think the council should propose going forward. I think that we should cut this budget further, a full cut by about $3 million. I'm going to go through some of those cuts as to where I'm recommending there. Most of those cuts are going to be around recurring expenses, not one-time expenses. We also have what's known as ARPA. This is federal dollars that were given to us. I am proposing that we move some of the budget items that are currently being proposed that are one-time expenses and move those into an ARPA spending plan And those would be in addition to other spending in ARPA that I'm going to go through here that are goals of all different constituents. They are stated goals of the administration, they are goals of the departments, and they are goals of the council, so that we can still maintain some of those high services. This proposed budget would actually create a surplus of around $175,000. I suspect actually it will be a little bit more as we plug in some of the changes. So for example, going back from changing around employee salaries, I didn't know exactly what salaries were. So if I've cut a position, I've estimated what that cut may be. I think I've tried to be conservative there, but I've tried to create a surplus in anticipation of not gaining the full property tax appeal of that roughly $850,000 and not forcing us as a group, both administration and council, to come back and potentially cut the budget further. I want to go through this in one fell swoop. And for me, this is a sustainable budget, not only for 2024, but going forward. So how are we achieving that? I think we should reduce hiring. I started this at a hiring freeze, quite frankly, and brought myself back up through it to these positions I'm recommending. I agree that ZPD needs 2 patrol folks. I have no new additional personnel for fire. They had quite an uplift last year. And as mentioned here earlier, there is that grant that is going to expire, and we're going to have to make sure that we're able to fund that. DPW, I agreed with the 2 recommended folks, especially because those folks, to my understanding, are effectively expense neutral because they generate revenue. And if we cut them, we will cut the revenue, and it's effectively a wash. Just expenses are lower, revenue is lower. One parks person, especially because that person is going to be reimbursed by the CDC at 75% of the total cost. The finance person, who Cindy explained, was already built into the budget, and the HR person who was explained, we actually approved that a few meetings ago, and so that was really just someone that was moving from part-time to full-time. I appreciate the administration's enthusiasm for the employees. I think that's something that we share. I do not see a way that we can give a 7% raise as well as a 2% increase in retirement. It is just not fiscally responsible to do that. And I hate to say that. A 4% raise is still almost $1 million cost to do so. But the extra 3% is another $728,000 that I just don't see that we can afford. And I'll talk a little bit later about how that might work. But I also very much agree with what something Councilor Traylor has said over and over again, is implementing a merit-based raise. It's just odd to me that we just give everyone the same raise when you're certainly in any organization are going to have some laggards, some superstars. Why aren't we rewarding those more and having those others catch up? I'm not saying that's something we'd have to tie to the budget, but I just think it's something that really makes a lot of sense to me as I've thought through raises. I did fight, though, to match and agree with the administration's request to increase the retirement contribution. I think that's something that, even though that's going to cost us $419,000 a year additional, is important to setting our employees up when they retire 10, 20 years ago, maybe 2 years from now, who knows? But I do think that's something that if we can get employees money into their retirement pre-tax, I think that is money well spent, and is still representative between the 4% increase, the 2% retirement match, and longevity pay. That is still an overall roughly 7% increase in total compensation for employees, which is pretty healthy, I think. I think we should implement a travel freeze for 2024. There's a lot of travel spend in there, travel and training. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how departments may still be able to achieve some of this stuff. Expenses are hard to go through at individual line items and understand what is being asked, especially if I'm not in those budget workshops the administration was having. It's not a complaint, it's just a fact. So what I have done is that if a department has asked for an increase in a line item of their budget, I have capped that at 4%. So if they've asked for no increase, I've granted that. If they've asked for a 10% increase, I've given them a 4% increase, but nothing more than that, because it's just not feasible to go through line item by line item. I have, though, put exceptions. You can see here things that are, I would say, outside of the control of the administration of the department, things like insurance, utilities, fuel. Even though there are actually savings, police actually has their fuel budget going down. But I have allowed those just to make sure we aren't unnecessarily harming departments or even employees when it's something that just really can't be helped. I've really eliminated any contingency dollars that I've seen in there. Things, if there's cost overruns, I want departments to live within their means. And I've also further reduced capital projects, although that's a bit of a, it's not like it's necessarily a reduction in some cases. In some cases, it's actually moved over to ARPA. A few other recommendations I've just sort of thought through, again, I want to make sure we are prepared if that property tax appeal does not happen, that we are not in a further bind. I want to make sure that our revenues in 2024 can start catching up to these recurring expenses. So the following year, there's momentum to perhaps start chipping away at some of those needs that Deputy Mayor Piquel mentioned. We've already talked about the grant expiration coming and being prepared for that. And in the past, we have had supplemental distributions on lit and public safety lit. I would not plan on that, but that may happen. And that may be something, if that does happen, we're able to add back in some of these cuts, perhaps add in a few employees mid-year if we see those distributions come in, so that, again, we're adding recurring revenue for recurring positions. Some other ideas I've thought through, again, we don't have to implement these right away necessarily, but potentially moving to a single legal representative for the town council and the administration, looking at our insurance policy and seeing if we can perhaps somewhat self-insure to reduce that, potentially further reducing hiring if we wanted to shift some monies around for other priorities. And I even think I would support going back into the red from a budget standpoint. If we added about $500,000 from both the LRS and MVH funds, those are funds that can only be used for road repair. That cash just sitting in a balance sheet really doesn't help us any. And so adding that back in truly is a one-time cost. Next year, if we're unable to afford it, we would just do a little bit less road maintenance. So I think that is something that's feasible. I talked about ARPA. We did spend a little bit of money on ARPA. If you remember, a couple of years ago, we implemented a one-time bonus to employees in partnership with the administration. So we've got about $5.6 million here. And my understanding is that these funds are now a lot more flexible in how we can use them versus when they were first proposed. However, we have to at least have a contract signed for the funds by the end of 2024. So again, my recommendation is let's just go ahead and get these funds spent in 2024, even though they don't necessarily have to be spent until 2026. And I'll talk through here in a minute how that works. So if I sort of look at what I'm cutting by department, there's 3 columns you can see here. The first column are cuts that I'm making in terms of dollar amounts. And I have a spreadsheet that we don't necessarily have to go through right now, but with all the details of this. So for example, communications budget cut, most of that is reducing the salary increase from 7% back down to 4%. In addition, though, you can see I'm adding back in on the ARPA budget. So if you look at DPW streets, for example, well, I've cut $1.13 million from their budget, but I'm giving grants through the ARPA budget of $1.525 million, including some of the equipment that we had talked about earlier that Deputy Mayor Piquel was disappointed that perhaps didn't make this budget. So I'm trying to find ways to make the cuts as minimally impactful as possible. Most of the cuts you're seeing on the left are going to be recurring, whether it's employees I'm recommending that we don't hire, or whether it is the raises that I recommend going back down from 7% to 4%. And then on the far right, you see what I have called this ARPA flexible spend. What I've done is taken about $250,000 of ARPA spending and broken it up by department and allowing them to look at the details of the cuts that I've put and add back in via ARPA some of those expenses. So for example, in fire, I've made some cuts, but I'm giving them $87,500 that if they wanted to use that for something that I've cut, they're able to do that. I mentioned earlier having a travel and training freeze. If that's an important part to a department, they can use this ARPA flexible spending and be able to put that travel and training back in, or really use it for anything else that I may have cut. So you can see I've really cut just about every single department here. But I've tried to add that money, those monies back in various ways. So thinking about highlights, where I think we should be spending the ARPA money, I also should note that the ARPA spending plan is not part of this budget. So what we'll do is we will pass a budget, and then if the council and administration wants to move forward with an ARPA spending plan, that is actually a different process that we have to go through. What I'm recommending is we give $200,000 to ZWorks. That is an organization we have supported every year to the tune of $60,000. However, in giving them this money, my anticipation is they don't come back for more. So, you know, this is their grant, if you will, to see if this is a viable organization. I think it is, but assuming it is, they can be self-sustaining after this grant, and it effectively removes a in perpetuity grant that the town perhaps may choose to make to this organization. Same thing for the Chamber of Commerce, $200,000, but I've given them an extra $10,000. They have been vocal about their concern about the lack of a downtown bathroom. I would like them, through a grant here of $10,000, to figure out how should we fix that. Now, I'm not asking them to fund it. I'm just asking them to come back with ideas, whether it is, you know, temporary bathrooms that they may have, whether it is part of a private public partnership that may happen, whether it is, you know, allowing businesses to be paid to use their bathrooms for the public, whatever that may be. I'd like them to go through and figure that out and come back to this to the town with that recommendation. $100,000 for the summer concert series. Same with ZWorks, same with Chamber of Commerce. We've given them $25,000 a year. This is enough for the next 4 years and allow them to bring back their sponsorships that they've lost over the last 4 years since COVID, and again, be sustainable. I've got a lot of improvements for parks, which I think both council administration will support. So I know that Jared had set the Elm Street Green Lions Park connector. I'm proposing putting that back in. We took down the land, so I think we should certainly activate it for the public. $60,000 for the Lincoln Park refresh, $250,000 for a Turkey Foot Bridge improvement. That was something that was feedback from Councilor Burke. And then $415,000 for trail studies and engineering. Basically, lots of different trails have been requested along Oak Street. I know President Plunkett has some requests there. Michigan Road, I've heard a lot about that. I know Councilor Burke has heard a lot about that. Royal Run has some requests. I know that Mr. Lance has spent a long time in putting together how that engineering would cost and how to do that. It doesn't necessarily pay for the trails themselves, but it gets us effectively to shovel ready, whether there's additional grants or future budgets that may want to put these in place. It really gets us a pretty far down the road. I've also, and so these are things, for example, that may have come out of the budget as requested. So I've got $150,000 for a transportation plan. That was in the budget. Now it's out of the budget. So the budget is now $150,000 less of a deficit, but we're still getting that. $150,000 for a comprehensive plan, $65,000 for street sweeping. And I've put in over $600,000 in maintenance and repairs. So I've taken the maintenance and repairs out of the budgets, put them into ARPA, but I didn't want to cut maintenance and repairs because it's the spend $1 for maintenance today versus spend $2 if you defer it tomorrow. So that's spread around many different organizations, police, fire, DPW, who need maintenance. That could be building maintenance, equipment maintenance, vehicle maintenance. And there's some other one-time spending in there as well. So if this is something that seems appealing, my recommendation is that, you know, we take this spreadsheet I have that I know is not perfect and clean it up within the CROW system with this revised payroll, with the proposed cuts, the shifting to ARPA, certainly get administration feedback, department feedback. What I also want to say is, you know, I'm not saying that this budget should be exactly how I dictate it. I think there may be changes that may want to be made within departments, either the administration or the department itself. I'm certainly fine with a like for like trade. So for example, if there is a capital project that I have identified, but there is a different capital project that would want to be prioritized and at the same dollar amount, I have no problem shifting those around. What I will not accept, or I don't think the council should accept, is, you know, saying, well, I don't want this capital project, but I want to hire 2 people. You're trading a one-time cost for a recurring cost. That's not the case, but certainly you could trade around current costs too. You know, if we want to find money for 2 firefighters, I'm willing to look. But we've got to take out the same dollar amounts in recurring costs in order to support that. So once that's finalized, I think we'd have an updated final version that I think is balanced, is sustainable. And I think we would approve that then at the next meeting. So we'd have a busy next couple of weeks. And then we would have to go through the process of approving that ARPA spending plan, because if we don't, we've cut a lot from this budget. If we don't backfill it with the ARPA, those things are not happening. The equipment, for example, that Mr. Lance may want that I put in the ARPA, if we don't pass the ARPA, he will not get that equipment unless he comes back for an additional appropriation, and we're back to where we started, which is a deficit budget. So that is where my head is at right now from the budget, and would certainly welcome feedback from my other counselors, because it is our budget, not my budget.
Josh, I just want to thank you for all the hard work you've put in over the weekend. This was very, very, very informative. I know we've had some conversation, but it's very enlightening to see it all put together. So I appreciate that. I have one question that I think is just to make sure you have enough money in there, is that comp plan, and he pulled it out to 150. I just want to make sure that's enough to get it done, because that's a critical component. I know it's future mayor Stairs' #1 priority is to get a comp plan in place to help guide his administration over the next 4 years.
Yeah, it's a good question, Brad. That number came to me from the original budget workshop presentation we had. I believe Mr. Dale presented that. And so my understanding is that is the dollar amount required for that.
It seems a little small, but I'll trust the pros, but I would like to have a triple check that one just to make sure there's enough money. 150 just doesn't sound like enough to do a full comp plan, but let's make sure.
Right, Josh, thank you very much for this. One of the things that, and this is outside of the discussion around the budget, but again, as to future planning, we have the supplemental distributions that occur in roughly about April of each year that amounts to anywhere from, I'm going to look towards Mr. Berry, anywhere from like a little less than $1 million to close to $2 million every year that we don't have a plan around how that gets distributed to the different departments, how that gets built into a budget. Do we want it as a philosophical standpoint? This is for future council to determine whether it goes into the single spend or if it gets somehow baked into recurring budgets. That's one of the questions that I think we need to think through as we look at the budget, and otherwise it does continue to build up the reserve funds for each, and that's kind of what the intent of it has been over the years, is it feeds into the fund reserves so that it can be spent on capital projects. But just to kind of think through, as you all stay on for future councils, what is that money earmarked for? And the problem with it is it's so highly variable from year to year that I don't know that you can just say, hey, let's fund firefighter X with this. I don't think that's possible, but to have a spending philosophy around what that supplemental distribution is probably going to be helpful for you all.
I mean, I would echo a lot of these sentiments, Josh, or Councilor Garrett. I appreciate your work on this. Councilor Choi, obviously been working on this too. I mean, I think this is, here we are, right? I mean, we've got, this is where over the next couple of weeks, the rubber meets the road. I mean, we've got a balanced budget that is sustainable, proposed, or at least considered here. And obviously there might be some other areas that council wants to work through over the next couple of weeks, to see what we can do, if we can do anything for different departments that may have been cut. But I mean, we've got a $6.5 million difference here, right? So I mean, I think now we've just got a couple of weeks to pare this down and make sure we get an appropriate budget, a sustainable budget. I think a lot of these things, like Councilor Choi mentioned, as it relates to some of these supplemental distributions, I think it's important for the incoming administration to have a plan with that as well. Some of the stuff that we approve in the budget, I think, is certainly specific to operations and making sure that we can sustain, the core functions of the town. Some of this stuff I think can be considered for future administrations and councils as well. So are there any questions from counselors for Deputy Mayor Kell we have Tim Barry from Crow here as well. Cindy Poor's here. Councilor Garrett's still online.
Not actually, I really don't have a question. Counselor Garrett hit on a lot of what I was going to speak on. I had 6 bullet points here, but what I do want to make clear is my support for the recommendations that Counselor Garrett put forward. That way, I think it'd be good for the administration to know that whether we support what was presented or not, because if we're unified in that, then it gives a little bit more of a direction for the administration rather than it just be one counselor's opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, to be clear, I'm certainly supportive of the majority of what I would like to have some firefighters. I'll be honest there, but I'm sensitive to the fact that we've got to find that money. But I mean, beyond that, I mean, I was really pleased when Councilor Garrett started going through this and talking about, ARPA money. There really hasn't been a plan for ARPA and being able to use that money for one-time expenses to help with trails that we hear about from people, to help with the bridge at Turkey Foot. There's just a lot of really good opportunities there for the ARPA spending. And obviously those are one-time expenses that will balance the budget. So I would agree with Councilor Traylor in that I'm certainly supportive of this method in this direction right here for sure. So we don't necessarily have to take a vote on that because that's not what we're voting on. What we are voting on is something completely different here.
I have one question about this from Josh Garrett's proposal to something that we're going to be talking about here on the new business line item of, as we potentially talk about increasing the urban service district. And one of those services that we provide to the urban service district is that policing. And I guess I just wonder if as we look at the next line items and this budget, and we talking about cutting a police officer, Josh, is that something that we've considered in your proposal?
It is, and if you remember the administration and Chief Spears, as they went through the budget iteration to present to us today, also recommended going from 4 to 2. I mean, certainly they would like to have 4. I would like to have 4, much like I agree with President Plunkett. I'd like to have additional firefighters, but I went based on their comfort level of 2 in the assumption of those in the urban service district as well. That's a good question, Craig.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of comments. I fully agree that now's the time to leverage some of those ARPA dollars to appropriate cover some one-time expenses that are in the budget that wouldn't be covered otherwise. So I think that's a very smart move by this council. I do have a question though about reserves, because in terms of just looking for revenue, before we talked about ARPA, I thought there might be an opportunity for us to tap some of those potential reserves without going too far in an unsafe position. When we were at our last meeting, Tim Barry from Crow mentioned, I wrote this down, I'd like Tim to confirm this, but he thought by end of year, we would have a potential reserve estimated balance of $29 million. And if that's true, I also asked him a follow-up question, which was what, in his professional opinion, what was kind of an appropriate amount that a municipality should have in reserves? And essentially it was up to 40%, which is kind of the gold standard. And so if we have a $50 million future balance budget, thinking that even if you had 50% in reserves, that would be holding on to $25 million. And in fact, if we're potentially projecting $29 million, it sounds like there could be a few $1 million at play that would still be available to us out of reserves, that would still be responsible enough to hold on to 50% of our revenue. And maybe there's a little bit of extra money that could be found for something like a couple extra firefighters. I just want to make sure there's not a revenue stream here that I'm missing based on the previous presentation.
Well, remember, if you're paying down reserves with something like salaries, you are creating a sustained deficit. So my recommendation is if you want to add further spending, you add one-time spending, things like if we're engineering for trails, we've still got to fund the trails. If you need to buy fire truck, but even that can be great sustaining because you got to buy it every so many years. So just be careful if you start
Yes,
looking
no,
at those reserves to do things like salaries.
I fully agree with you. Yeah, so it wouldn't be for that. So if there were something else in this budget that got cut, but there were reserves that we could spend that wouldn't put us in any risk whatsoever. In fact, that we're still in a very conservative place, I think, in terms of these dollar amounts. So I just want to make sure there's not some money there that we're overlooking, because that is a very healthy reserve. But I would like Tim to comment on that.
I mean, that's certainly good. That's certainly a good point to make, but I would also point out that over the last 21 years, we've gone from 10,531 people to 31,702. I would assume that the reserves that Tim talks about are for more established communities that have a more consistent budget or a more consistent revenue stream and expense stream. I mean, we're in a unique spot, I think, with this town, where, in my opinion, it's never been more important to have healthy reserves because of the growth that we're experiencing, and people still want to be here, and they're still coming, and we're still building, and we're still developing. And we've got to make sure that that's why it's so important to make sure we have a sustainable budget, and why it's so important, in my opinion, to have reserves in the event that you need to use them for expenses that we're not prepared for. I mean, I don't know what the next 5 to 10 years looks like, but
I don't want you to
growth.
Yeah, but well taken. I don't want you to make the assumption that I'm saying we should do this. I'm just asking if there are dollars there for us to weigh over the next 2 or 3 weeks as we're trying to find it. Because if it's not there, it's not a move we should make, according to Tim, then that's off the table. But if it is, it's something to consider.
I think to Josh's point on some of these issues, we moved a lot of this over to ARPA funds. And so the reserve is healthier because of that kind of shifting as well. Otherwise, we would be further spending down what we have in the fund balances. That aside, the other comment that I'd like to make is my support for, and I have to think through this a little more and talk to the organizations involved, but at first blush, the support for giving one-time single distribution one more time for organizations like Z-Works and Chamber of Commerce and the Summer Concert Series. Not that I don't see value in what they do, I see incredible value, but more and more as other organizations find out that we are supporting individual organizations, there's going to be a little bit of grumbling now, but further grumbling down the road of why not us as well? Why don't we get a $50,000 a year contribution from town council or the administration? So those kind of conversations, I think, are difficult to have as community support organizations continue to grow. And so Josh's proposal that we give them a one-time grant to support them several years, and that gives them the off-ramp to no longer depend on us, I think is a good policy to have as well. And maybe one of the things that we might want to think about going forward is to take some of the savings out of so between Z-Works and the chamber, and to some degree the Summer Concert Series, it's over $100,000 a year. We may want to think about shifting that into the community foundation grant process so that it could support other organizations. Not that we should lose that in how we support community organizations like Z-Works and Chamber, but that we distribute that to other organizations that are supporting our community as well.
We have that in place now. I mean,
No, I know we have it in place. I'm saying further fund it,
Yeah.
increase the funding for it.
Gotcha.
I would still like Tim to address my comments.
Tim Berry, financial advisor to the town with Crow. Counselor, what I think is most appropriate is to take the recommended changes from Counselor Plunkett or Counselor Garrett, put those into the model and look at that and exactly where we're going to end up. Yes, you currently have a balance in your ARPA fund of $5.6 million. So there still will be dollars available to utilize from ARPA for next year that will still need to be identified for projects, contracts entered into by December 31st of next year. So there is some opportunity there. Let's look at what those fund balances will be, where we anticipate they will be at the end of next year. And then make some analysis as to what is the appropriate level of reserve balances looking forward.
Thank you.
Tim, do you just obviously you haven't seen the spreadsheet that Josh mentions, but off the cuff here, listening to some of the things he's saying, do you have any concerns with sustainability with his changes and modifications?
Based on what I've heard, no, I've not seen them. I was a little preoccupied this weekend and unavailable for a whole lot of discussion Friday. I apologize for that. I received a couple of calls from council members and emails. My son was married on Saturday, actually here in Zionsville. So, well,
Congratulations.
technically, I guess, maybe not Zionsville, but it has a Zionsville address. Let's put it that way. So I was a little preoccupied this weekend celebrating that and didn't have an opportunity to respond to some of the requests. I do apologize for that, but do believe that it is important to have good, strong balances and reserves. I will say that I too am concerned about the additional levy growth request from DLGF and whether you would be able to receive all of that. So it is important to understand that and then not pass a budget now and have to come back and make additional cuts later. I think that's important to set the town up appropriately there.
Would it be advisable then, as far as the levy appeal goes, then I know in the process of what we're doing, you know, you have to build in the full levy appeal as a revenue stream, but then to take that out until and bake it into a 2025 budget. No, not take it out of the budget.
No, I understand what you're saying, but no, I would not do that or suggest that, because that would give the opportunity for them to state that, yes, in fact, you do not need that additional levy.
I got it. Okay.
So Tim, just for purposes of clarification and maybe even for public input, today what we are approving or voting to approve or introduce on first reading, I should say, would be the Form 3, which is the maximum budget estimate, correct? This is not the administration's budget or what council is proposing. This is the maximum allowable budget. And then over the next 2 weeks, we'll dial in on the specifics of the budget.
Which you actually voted to approve at your last meeting as it was in the introduced version. Was that Form 3, which was the max. Yes, that is correct.
But we didn't hold a public hearing.
That's correct. Today is the public
So
hearing.
today will
on
be a
that.
public hearing.
Yes, right. And then I was just kind of going through the whole process.
Yeah.
And then the final adoption would be available on October 2nd.
Okay, so then basically I just need to open the public hearing, take comment. We don't necessarily need to take any action on this right now.
Correct.
So there's no vote. And then again, over the next couple of weeks, we would finalize this on hopefully October 2nd. Right? So that
That
could
is
be
correct.
okay.
And then, and again, for both yours, but also the public's understanding, it is important because the additional levy request is due to DLGF by October the 19th. So that allows us the appropriate time to prepare the narrative, present that information to DLGF in a timely manner to qualify for both, should the council approve the rural to urban, as well as the additional levy request for excess growth in your assessed value over the last 3 years.
Okay. So are there any questions for Tim, Josh, or Mr. Patel?
I am, and I know, I just have presented this and I will send this. In fact, I've already sent this to Cindy so that we can share this or she can share it amongst council department heads. I am curious if there's any feedback from the administration or not at this time. We certainly want to work together to get this done. And I think this gives us a framework and flexibility to satisfy, different priorities.
What I would say is that I appreciate the work that you put into this. I'm not sure how long it took you, but it seems that you've done some work. I am a little concerned. The administration has made a point to not enter into any new agreements or any new agreements to leave the new administration open. And I wonder if we are putting a constraint on a new council by using, as I agree, you need to use all these ARPA funds. And I don't necessarily on its face disagree with your plan. But I do have a concern that we are not necessarily holding a new council to this, but I think we are obligating the council, whether it's to these projects that we agree are priorities. But then again, there's going to be a new majority on the council. It may be 3 of these members here on that new council, and that would be, the way it is. My point is, I hate to put our wants and needs on a brand new council without full contact and understanding that point, if that makes sense to you.
I mean, I understand. I mean, I've tried to take into effect, what potentially the futures administrations have been saying in their campaigning. My understanding, again, with the ARPA funding plan is, and I appreciate, the administration's prudence in handing it over to the next administration, next council, that can always be amended. What I'm also hoping to do together here is to create a budget that allows perhaps some flexibility as they go through their next budget year. So that would be the 2025 budget in 2024, where they will then be able to get that say. It's a funny process, right? Mayor Styron pointed this out in her first budget year that she inherited Tim Hawk's budget, and Mayor Stair will be inheriting Mayor Styron's budget. It's not perfect, but I do think if you look through it, most of what is being driven by is departmental needs, which I don't know that would necessarily change with a new administration, new budget, and by what I think is community needs, especially around parks and pathways. But it's certainly something to consider.
Like I said, I don't on its face disagree with what you're saying. We'll definitely look at everything that you've put together and consider all of it. I just wanted to bring that point that it does concern me that we might be doing that, and I want to tread lightly if it's perceived that way.
I think one thing to remember as far as whether this is spent out of the fund balances that we have currently, or whether it's spent out of ARPA, it is money that is available. And if we get to a point, I mean, this is not the way that I would want to do it, but and correct me if I'm wrong, anybody, Mr. Berry or you, is that it is a pool of money, whether it comes out of ARPA or it comes out of our fund balances, that if it's decided that, okay, let's not build this into ARPA, then there's no problem with coming back, because it would have naturally come out of the fund balances in the first place to come back and ask for an appropriation to cover the cost later on next year, if that's the way that shifting needs to be done. Am I thinking through this right, Councilor Garrett?
Yeah, you are. And I think one other thing to think through too is, the ARPA rules are, it has to be under contract in 2024. the new counselors, having been one myself at one point, will be drinking from the fire hose. If they don't get in front of that quickly, it starts putting a big burden on the department heads to get those under contract as well. So I think it's a reasonable plan. I mean, I'm certainly welcome to hear from those that are Mayor Lexter or anyone else if that's appropriate at some point if they want to reach out. But I do think this will be well received by those that are running today.
I mean, we could also, the reality is because of the timeline of the ARPA money, we could also amend the ARPA plan between now and 12/31 of this year.
100%.
And we could release those funds for those capital expenses. Or at least then the plan's been declared. And then the department heads can go out for those, capital outlays and for the trucks and the equipment and the things that we would put in there anyway. So, and then to your point, Councilor Choi, you wouldn't necessarily need to take money from one pocket and put it in the other. We could just make sure that's covered for 1/1 of 24.
Yeah, and I think I was just trying to make the point, whether it's our fund balances or the ARPA money, that
Right.
it is a pool of money to spend.
And that
So-
ARPA is still considered part of that fund balance. I mean, so the reality is it is going to be spent down. So, yeah. Okay. Is there anything else from council? All right, so this is obviously, as we mentioned last time, we've already gone through the first step of this. So this is a public hearing. I approve publication in the gateway of public notice of public hearing. At this point, I'll open the public hearing. If any members from the public who would like to speak, and I'll close the public hearing. Thank you very much. So again, no action needs to take place here. We'll move on to item B of old business is a consideration of a resolution regarding the appropriation of additional funds. This is the Ready Grant. And with this resolution 2023-16. We've got Cindy Poor, Director of Finance and Records, and Lance, DPW Director here available if needed. Are there any questions or anything from counselors or before you may not have to come up, Lance, who knows?
I had a quick question. I know there was some discussion last time about, how this could be spent. Mr. Lance, I know the state has talked about a second Ready Grant potential and Styron administration went through with the council to get this first grant approved. If we didn't pass this grant now, is there any implication that you would see about a potential second grant application for further funds?
Sorry, I was distracted. Someone left their phone up here. So. Missing that. There it is. I think it's very safe to say that if we fail to capitalize on this opportunity in round one, that we probably won't even be allowed at the table to discuss round two.
Okay, thank you. That was my fear.
So my big concern was the flexibility within these funds. Can you spell out for us exactly what we can spend this on? And if we approve this, what latitude the administration would have to alter that?
Absolutely. If you will accept an enumeration as opposed to a spelling, we're going to go with some numbers talks here. So what is the 1.9 million that the town was awarded? It is all engineering and design costs for transportation, pedestrian projects, all in support of the economic development to be gained by the development of the gateway area. Let's talk specific numbers here. There are 6 elements, and these were probably 90% my number estimates. Corey Sharp, when she joined the team, helped flesh out or finalize a few of these numbers. But there are 6 components to this. So the first one is a road realignment and intersection improvement. That is the realignment of what is now Main Street as you leave the bridge north of Bubs to swing that westward and align it with First Street. This, as far as transportation projects go, this goes back to 2000, at least 15. 15 years ago, 2007-ish, when we've taken hard looks at what's the best solution for not just vehicular access, but also pedestrian movement through the downtown area. So the first component for the realignment of the road and an intersection improvement at Sycamore and First is $397,500.
Also necessary in support of a new intersection location, we have some changes necessary along the existing First Street corridor, that Dairy Queen block, if you will. The estimate for engineering expense there is $297,500. Back in 2012, we constructed a pathway from US 421 Michigan Road to Lions Park parking lot. There's a lot of challenges in that last portion of the pathway to get on over to the sidewalk system at Elm Street. So we have some decent preliminary engineering already completed, but the third element of the engineering expenses is $49,000 to complete the design for the pathway extension and bring that appropriately and properly the rest of the way along Sycamore Street. The biggest chunk of the total amount is $517,500, and that is for utility coordination and potential burial along the First Street corridor and in the areas where the transmission lines go overland there at the old Citgo site. So those first four elements are purely transportation and pedestrian projects. Those are the numbers that I generated to justify this 1.9. The remaining two items that were included in the total amount are in regard to the plaza grounds. And that is the preferred ZGA, I guess, land use, if you will, showed a plaza there where the Citgo site has remained dormant. That includes also a called urban pathway section. Think Monon, or not Monon, but think of the cultural trail downtown, right? This is an experiential pedestrian way to walk down to the Bubs area and south of Village of Zionsville. So there were two components to round out our total of 6 items. The first was called Plaza Ground Surface, and that was designed. What is the ground going to look like? That's nothing vertical. That was $150,000. And then the final amount, I'm sorry, cross that out. The plaza ground surface was $227,500. And the final element was what's called plaza grounds amenities, $150,000. That's for conceptual designs of what those vertical elements may be. Is it a fountain? Is it statues? Is it what have you? If you add all of those numbers up that I just gave you, it comes to $1.639 million. Because of the way this grant ultimately played out, the CERTA group, which you joined, you had Mayor Fadis here. I think that group originally submitted a holistic grant application totaling around $50 million. When the funds were finally allocated from the state or distributed or awarded, that group got $20 million. So that group, led by the Fishers Consortium, went back through its partners and said, all right, this was what you asked for. Now we're going to get this. So this is kind of a how would you spend $1.9 million. If you add those numbers up to the 1.639 million, it does include about a 15% contingency to allow for fluctuations in road design elements, intersection treatments. We'll be looking at robust pedestrian signals in that congested downtown area. So those are the 6 elements that make up the 1.9. It is my recommendation that you approve this additional appropriation, primarily so we get working on this long-standing and off-tackled, but yet not acted upon traffic issue downtown.
Thank you.
Lance, I've got a question. Based on what you just said, $377,000, sorry, it's for this plaza. And this has been probably the one thing that's irritated me the most about this project is this plaza area, this park area in the middle. It's difficult for me to understand how we're going to improve traffic flow and put a park in between 2 roads and increase traffic signals and allow people to walk right through there. And do whatever they're going to do. My question is, if the new administration comes in and says they don't want that there, can that be modified? Is this gateway project set in stone from the early rough drafts we saw 2 years ago?
Well, the Zionsville Gateway Plan was adopted by both the town council and the plan commission as an amendment to the comprehensive plan. Now, within that plan, there is some flexibility, absolutely. But what remains consistent across all plans as well as all past efforts is the transportation element, the realignment of the roads. and the improvement of the intersections. So to your question, I understand there is yet some nebulous nature to what this plaza ultimately looks at. Whatever we do with an intersection improvement, it's going to have a robust pedestrian component to it. So people have a high comfort level moving across these busier roads in the downtown area. We know we're going to get lots of pedestrians as our events increase downtown. So I guess if the plaza is a sticking point, and frankly, we have worked with our design collection, our selected designer and engineer, and they stand waiting in the wings, ready to execute a design contract for the roadway elements, should you approve all of this or a portion thereof. But we have not even had discussions yet with the design team that would be focused more on a landscape architect element. If there's any or enough discomfort in the plaza area and what it ultimately looks like, I believe you have the flexibility to approve less than the amount advertised. So if you wanted to specifically hold off, keep in mind, it is my recommendation that we get to work on all of these elements under the entirety of the grant amount. But if the plaza is a sticking point with this council, I would recommend that you, in your motion, you could frame it specific to those first 4 elements, approve a lesser amount of 1.5 million, and leave that 400,000 for the next administration or the next council to consider in their appropriation. Once a little bit more direction is achieved through the transportation projects.
Well, I mean, to be clear, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I don't see, this is, in my opinion, one of those careful what we wish for. We're going to realign the roads and in the effort to improve traffic flow and then encourage people to walk across the roads and hang out and watch traffic fly by. So I hope I'm wrong. I hope it's different.
I just want to point out, I have one question. So real quick, the 4 main was realigned Main First Street. Second was First Street needed some adjustments further up. Third is utility coordination. What was the 4th?
Finalizing the pathway from Lions Park over to the sidewalk system along Elm Street.
So I just want to point out that we're spending $377,000 potentially on a plaza. Nothing vertical, right? Just the plan.
No, that total amount of the 2 elements would include the vertical consideration of vertical elements to be determined. Is that a pavilion? Is it a fountain? I don't know.
So there is construction. There is vertical in that.
This is all design.
It's all designed. This is engineering.
So that's what I'm saying. So there's nothing vertical being created. It's all designed.
Nothing there. No, nothing is built
So
as a result of this.
$377,000 on that. And then we go back to Brad Burke's, Vice President Burke's thought on the plan for the comprehensive plan of the town is $150,000. These just numbers are it's just kind of skewed in my mind that we're looking at a plan for this plaza for $377,000. And then we're looking at $150,000 for the comprehensive plan for the entire town of Zionsville. I don't know if our priorities are a little skewed on that, or if I'm just confused on it. I think I publicly just wanted to have the public understand that we talked about the comprehensive plan for 150,000. Is that enough? And then we come down here to these 2 priorities of the 6 for this grant, which is money that we, can receive. But to me, it blows my mind that we're spending $377,000 on a plan. And I think to the Deputy Mayor's point, this is the current administration's, model that we've followed for this. And it's great that the current administration was able to gain this ready grant money with the help of the council and the staff, of course. But I'm kind of looking at those numbers. There's nothing being built for almost $400,000 necessarily with that second 5 and 6. So I like your recommendation that maybe this gets approved in a way that allows more input for that plaza area as we move forward. So I just wanted to hear that out loud.
Sure.
And I appreciate your giving us all these talking points on these 6 line items.
Well, a comprehensive plan doesn't entail the level of detail that this goes into. This is survey. This is actually designing construction plans. So it's not just a conceptual design, it's taking those conceptual designs that are identified in the ZGA study and actually bringing them to a point where you could hire a contractor to do it. So it's a much more involved process than just a planning exercise.
And I think we'll play off of the old comprehensive plan too. So you have something to start off of, right? When it comes to the new comprehensive plan.
Sure.
So, and I respect that. I understand that. I just, again, I think with the plaza, the Councilor Plunkett's, or President Plunkett's idea about, people walking through a busier intersection. I think we do need to plan it properly and, spend the right amount, whatever that is, but I'm excited for the gateway. I was just kind of looking at those numbers and wondering how that's going to pan out with just planning on both things. So, but I appreciate all this breakdown. Makes it easier for us to kind of move forward. And that's all my comments.
So I would just, from my perspective, I would recommend that we approve the full amount just from the optics of, Mr. Lance pointed out, we did go through the process, regardless of what you feel of the gateway, we went through the process and approved the general design based on the Planning Commission recommendation. We asked for the ready grant based on that design and received it. I don't see any harm in going forward with the design as requested. If the future administration, future councils, in seeing the details of that design decides this is not for us, there's no obligation to then build it. Holding back the design, I just feel gives you an incomplete view of what that may look like. And to President Plunkett's point, if we look at it and say, gee, this is terrible for pedestrians, well, let's not build it, right? We're not obligating ourselves to put dirt or put shovels in the ground. We're just getting the money that we've asked for. And if we ask for more money, I think they may question us like, well, you asked for money last time, you didn't spend it all. Why should we give it to you? So I'm just worried the precedent this sets, and I don't feel it's obligating us to anything that the next administration may not want to do.
I did hear the comment from the first meeting when this was introduced on the engagement of our next administration. And immediately thereafter, I reached out to our I almost said president-elect. That's for now, it's just mayor-elect, maybe someday, John. And quickly met with him, reviewed the transportation elements and the steps we had taken so far, reviewed them toward the gateway. So it is my commitment to him that he is now engaged in this process through the remainder of this year as an interested party. Certainly you don't want to just flip a switch on January 1, but he will be from here on out part of the design development process.
And he did reach out with an endorsement of approving this. So all of my questions from last meeting have been answered. So if you're ready for a motion, I'll make one.
Yeah, we did hold a public hearing on August 21st for this, so there's no need for a public hearing. Are there any other questions for Lance or anyone else? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
First by Councilor Trailer.
Second.
A second by Vice President Burke. Amy, if you would please do a roll call.
Yes, President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Councilor Choi,
Yes.
Councilor Culp is not present, Councilor Garrett,
Yes.
Councilor Melton,
Yes.
Councilor Trailer.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much.
Up next, first item of new business is a consideration of a resolution regarding the appropriation of additional funds. This is for the Hussey Mayfield Memorial Library, Resolution 2023-17. And we have Kristen Shelley, Executive Director of the Hussey Mayfield Memorial Public Library, here to present.
Good morning, council members. I'm taking this opportunity to introduce myself. I am literally the brand new executive director of the Hussey Mayfield Memorial Public Library. Been on the job just over a month. So while I'm new to Indiana libraries, I have decades, and that's decades with an S, of experience in both Michigan and Ohio libraries. But I will say, each one of them funds differently and each one of them expects different things from budgets. So here today to ask for additional appropriations for the continuation of the construction of the new Whitestown branch. And while the board and the construction company and the staff have been incredible stewards of the public's money, we do have, and they've been fiscally responsible throughout the process of building the second branch. Costs have increased astronomically from when we first went for the $9 million bond for the construction. As I said, our team has been fiscally responsible and we will be able to finish the building with money that we have on hand. We just need to come to all of you, our fiscal body, per the state law, and ask for permission to be able to spend the money that we have. And just to confirm, we are not requesting any additional funds. We are not asking for a tax rate increase, and we are not asking for any money from the town. They're all funds that we have on hand. Our request simply, as I said, is to use what we have available to cover some extra expenses the library has encountered during the construction process. I don't think anybody could have anticipated how much construction costs have gone up and what inflation has done with pretty much everything. Specifically, the library has funds available in 3 different areas that need to be reallocated. $257,312 from a supplemental local income tax distribution, $100,000 from the Library Improvement Reserve Fund, and $350,000 from the Rainy Day Fund, which is a total additional appropriation of $707,312. I do believe in your packet there was the certified copy of additional appropriations, which has more details about these funds. And throughout the past few months, the library team has completed an extensive review of our finances to find ways to cover these increased construction costs. The funding sources worksheet in your packet provides a detailed summary of how our team has redirected funds to address additional construction costs. Specifically, $591,619 in estimated savings from the delay in the opening of the new branch. That also comes with construction projects. Delays. $100,000 from the undesignated gift fund and $50,000 that were received from the library foundation. The last 3 areas highlighted on that sheet, I hope your sheets are highlighted, mine is highlighted, are portions we need your approval to use. And again, that's the $250,312 from the supplemental local income tax distribution, $100,000 from the Library Improvement Reserve Fund, $350,000 from our Rainy Day Fund, for again a total of $707,312. And then also included in your packet is a very colorful pie chart that shows all these distributions. Again, kudos to the library team, to the library board of trustees, to the construction company, to the architects for managing this process within our current available funds. So I simply ask that you consider approving the resolution.
Thank you, Kristen. Welcome, by the way. Welcome. To be clear for council, this is not, as Kristen mentioned, these are 3 funds that are currently under the library's taxing unit or taxing name. This is not money that comes from the town. This is money, we've had to do this in the past where we just have to approve it and then they can go spend it. So are there any questions for Kristen?
I mean, we don't manage that budget to your point, but I mean, it's a tough spot for you to have to tap into these dollars to have to finish the project. You really don't have a choice. You have to finish the project. So I know these are tough decisions. I just hope that all the funds that you're having to tap into, I mean, this is going to take away a lot of dollars that you were counting on for potential other needs at the library. And I mean, I need to, I mean, I'll obviously support this is what you're recommending, but I am without being a member of your board, I would be concerned that some of these dollar balances are going to be kind of tight for a while if you have other needs at both branches.
Thank you. And rest assured, we have not drained those three funds.
That's good news.
Any other questions for Kristen? This is a public hearing. I have proof of publication of the notice of the public hearing. At this point, I'll open the public hearing. If there's any members from the public who would like to comment. Having none, I will close the public hearing. Any additional discussions or questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 2023-17.
First by Councilor Melton,
Second.
second by Councilor Choi. Amy, if you would go down a roll call, please.
Yes. President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Counselor Choi,
Yes.
Counselor Culp is not present. Counselor Garrett,
Yes, and I actually have to leave, so this will be my last vote. You can stop doing roll calls. So, but I am a yes.
Thank you.
thank you. Counselor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think for purposes of the meeting and public record, Counselor Garrett has left the meeting. So I'm assuming we can go to just normal votes at this point. Is that correct?
I recommend you still do the.
Still do a roll call?
Still do the roll
Okay,
call.
very good. Up next is the consideration of an ordinance amending the town of Zionsville zoning ordinances for Appaloosa Crossing, ordinance 2023-17. We have Roger Kilmer, Senior Planner, Community Economic Development, and Matt Price, Attorney from Denton to present.
Good morning, members of the council. Roger Kilmer, Senior Planner with the town. The ordinance provided before you for consideration is a rezoning request of 2.811 acres located in the Appaloosa Crossing development. I have on the screen for orientation purposes, we're talking about this area that is outlined in black. It is known as outlots J and K. All of block B of Appaloosa Crossing and a portion of Appaloosa Drive. Appaloosa Drive is the drive that runs back behind these lots. The request is to rezone the property from rural professional business district to the rural general business district and remaining within the rural Michigan Road overlay. The 2014 Zionsville Comprehensive Plan Amendment recommends a mixed use development for the area. The rezoning request is consistent with the future land use recommendation. At its August 21st, 2023 meeting, the Plan Commission voted to forward a favorable recommendation to the town council by a unanimous vote of 7-0 of the rezoning request, with commitments for the property owner that future development on the subject site would be limited to a maximum height of the main roof line or parapet at 40 feet, and that exterior lighting would automatically be dimmed by 50% at 10 p.m. This is just a quick overview of what the Plan Commission acted upon. I'll turn it over to the petitioner to provide details.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the council. Matt Price here on behalf of Harris FLP. Mr. Kilmer's summary was very succinct and captured the essence of the proposal. Just to give maybe a brief overview of the history of this property. Originally, this was designed for a power center type commercial development with a little over 2/3 of the total acreage devoted to general business uses. In fact, the anchor tenant originally was proposed to be a Kroger. And so what's happened over the years is it's been modified, really modernized and updated to reflect current development patterns, the needs of the community and really where the marketplace is. And so in connection with that, in 2020, Mr. Harris added the parcel that you see immediately south of the area outlined in black. So this area, if I can do this area right here, right there. It's approximately 1.35 acres. And that area was not part of the original Appaloosa Crossing development. It was added. It has a water feature located on it now. And that area provides additional buffering from the residential use to the south. Originally, the concept was behind the development is that the PB zoning was located on the southern portion of the project to buffer between the residential uses on the east and the south. What's happened over time, as you know, is that we've added the residential uses to the east, providing a nice transition between residential uses, and we've added the acreage to the south, providing a buffering from the residential properties to the south. We anticipate that the development will be very much like the mixed-use building that you see north, that's at the very north end of the aerial that you see there today, that has the Verde, the dentist office, the bakery, be very similar types of uses located in this development as well. We anticipate a brunch spot, perhaps a chiropractor, those type of mixed uses in the new building. Mr. Harris and I are available to answer any questions that you have, and appreciate very much your time this morning. Thank you.
Are there any questions from counselors?
Matt, you're rezoning from rural professional. And I know you talked about the original intent of this project back in the day with Kroger and everything. Would that have qualified under rural professional? What's a good example of what would be a rural professional development?
It's the classic type of use would be a medical office use, professional service type uses would be in the professional business. Part of what we're responding to, I think, is a change in office demand since COVID. Certainly, one of the other things that we found is that the mixed use building, much like what's done at the north end of the project, does incorporate some office like uses. So we do have, for example, a dentist office in that building. We would anticipate similar types of medical related uses to be compatible with this building as well.
It really opens it up for more of a bit of a retail, maybe perhaps food eatery.
You've hit right on it. What it permits primarily for us is the food service. And for example, we're looking at a brunch type spot there today that's not available in the northern building. This would provide that opportunity here.
And is the potential culverts that I've heard that's going in, is that in this particular location, or that's the lot above that? This is not for the culverts, right? This would be for a duplicate of where we see Verde.
Right. So that parcel immediately north of the area outlined in black is the proposed culverts, okay, which has received its final plan commission approval as of August 21.
But that's not at all to do with this particular project.
It's not. No, that parcel is today zoned general business already.
So when you talk about the lighting issue, I mean, in talking to residents in the area, I think a lot of people are excited about Culver's, but that people just don't love the lighting in there. And I feel like there's already been some accommodation with that Culver's lighting. And so I feel like, and I have to go up at night, I guess, more to the building with Verde. I don't feel like there's not an egregious lighting already at that building. I don't think. Have you had complaints about that particular lighting? I know BP got a lot of attention last year.
Yeah, I think primarily the focus has been on the BP convenience store. What you referenced with regard to Culver's is true. There have been accommodations where Culver's agreed not to have, for example, blue lighting on the building around the cornice or top level of the building. I think that was in response to some of the concerns about the BP, and which I think had to do more with the color palette and intensity of that lighting. And so there's been an accommodation on the Culver's voluntarily by the Culver's restaurant operator. And then on this building, as Mr. Kilmer mentioned, we've agreed to a dimmer that would be enacted automatically at by 10 p.m.
Is that same dimmer on the other property that's already on the north end or no?
It is not. It is not.
Okay. And then just clarify on the map that you're showing us, you got the south border to the in the black that's outlined. Just south of that, there is a small acreage that looks like it has a retention pond. You were pointing out that's obviously not part of this. You were just pointing out that that's additional buffer that was purchased later that's there.
Correct.
I was recently just at this property in the neighborhood south of there. There's not a lot of trees. And it sounded like maybe, I don't know if there's any accommodation to this, but not just that the buffer is there for the pond, because you're looking at, I don't know, pretty decent chunk of acreage, but is there any plan to, on that south side there, put up, full canopy of some kind of protection of trees or something else that I'm not hearing about? Because that also takes away a lot of that distraction and lighting.
Yeah. No, that's a very excellent point. Yes, at the development plan stage. So when this project comes through for development plan, one of the features of that will be landscaping along the south and eastern perimeter. That is a requirement of Zionsville zoning ordinance. One of the things that we've done really on each one of the parcels as they've come through for development plan is we've obtained some relief with regard to landscaping between the parking lot and the frontage of the property, and relocated those plantings more strategically to areas between residential areas and our parking lot. And I anticipate that's what would be done here too. So an enhanced landscaping along the southern and eastern perimeter.
I think it would go a long way to accommodating folks. It's pretty thin in some of the other places out there. So, again, I think a lot of it's just lighting and noise. I don't think it's necessarily the accessibility to have additional shopping opportunities. I think people enjoy that. I think it really is just lighting and sound.
I was following along on for the Culvers during the planning commission. I just want to say the planning commission asked a lot of great questions surrounding signage and lighting regarding that. So I'm really happy to see that interaction. But I just was there a fountain? So I think we had comments on a fountain in one of those retention ponds. Is the one furthest to the south here, or is it the one in back?
Yes, it's the having a water feature along Michigan Road is a requirement of the zoning commitments for the project that really have been in place since 2008. And so there will be a fountain installed in the southern detention pond.
Okay,
as part of that.
Great.
The pond that I was just referencing?
Yes.
I mean, it may be beautification, but I'm not so sure about noise.
Well, I mean, the thought was beautification and to keep the pond aerated, reduce algae growth, and provide a decorative feature there.
Any other questions for Mr. Price? I would point out, I certainly appreciate a lot of these questions, a lot of these things come up at the Plan Commission level, and I certainly appreciate the work of the Plan Commission, which is comprised of 4 appointments by the mayor, 3 by the council, and for that to come through unanimous, 7 in favor, 0 opposed. I think it's important that the public understands we put a lot of weight in what the Plan Commission does. So any questions for Mr. Price? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion. I will make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-17.
Second.
Second by Councilor Trailer. Amy, if we're required to, would you please move forward with the roll call vote?
Yes, President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Councillor Choi,
Yes.
Councillor Culp is not present, Councillor Garrett is not present, Councillor Milton,
Yes.
Councillor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, moving along. Introduction, up next on the agenda is introduction of a resolution regarding a fiscal plan for reclassifying certain areas within the consolidated town of Zionsville from the rural service district to the urban service district. This is resolution 2023-19, and we have Deputy Mayor Piquel and Tim Berry to present. or maybe just Tim Berry. Sorry.
Thank you, Tim Berry with Crow. We worked with the town, the affected departments, the Department of DPW, as well as the police department, as well as general costs associated with administration of the town in implementing the rural to urban configuration changes for Devonshire, Chelsea, and Holiday Farms.
Were there any questions from counselors regarding this introduction? I do know that this has been something that we had discussed with even the prior deputy mayor, and this council has mentioned wanting to wrap this up and bring in these areas into the urban service district. There is a little bit of, and I know some of the next item would be a little bit more, actionable perhaps, but there is a, in our reorganization, there is a requirement as developments become certain or completed at certain levels, they are required to be brought in, assuming they have contiguous utilities and we're providing service to them. So this really, in my opinion, is just checking a box and doing something that probably should have been done 2, 3, or 4 or 5 years ago in some of these cases, potentially. So
Certainly with the Holiday Farm
yeah,
piece, yes.
yeah. Any questions for Tim? Having none, I will make a motion to approve resolution 2023-19.
Second.
A second by Counselor Choi. Amy, if you would please roll call vote.
Yes, President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Counselor Choi,
Yes.
Counselor Culp is not present, Counselor Garrett is not present, Counselor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the consideration of an ordinance reclassifying certain areas within the consolidated town of Zionsville from rural service to urban service. So as you'll recall, we just went through the fiscal plan for this particular proposal. This will require 2 readings. This is a first reading, but this would be the ordinance to actually bring these developments into the urban service district. Are there any questions from counselors?
Now I'd make a motion to introduce.
And first by Counselor Trailer.
Second.
A second by Counselor Choi. Amy, if you would please roll call vote.
Yes, President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Counselor Choi,
Yes.
Counselor Culp is not present, Counselor Garrett is not present, Counselor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Moving along, we have consideration of an ordinance amending the 2023 salary ordinance. This is 2023-19. This is also a first reading, and we have HR Director Joe Keel here to present, or Cindy for.
Looks like a 1, 2, 3, not it.
This change is to allow for the salary for the new person that we're wanting to hire, the accounting and asset administrator.
You said, I'm sorry, what was that last part for accounting and what was that?
Accounting and asset administrator.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Cindy? Again, this is first reading. If there are no questions for Cindy, I'll make a motion to introduce ordinance 2023-19 on first reading.
Second.
A second by Counselor Melton. Amy, if you would please roll call vote.
Yes, President Plunkett,
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Counselor Choi,
Yes.
Counselor Culp is not present, Counselor Garrett is not present, Counselor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Cindy. Are there, up next would be other matters. Are there any other matters from council?
Just one comment. I just wanted to recognize Molly Whitehead, who's a partner with Zionsville here. The Indiana Chamber of Commerce has named the Boone County Community, named Boone County Community of the Year by NextEra Energy Resources. Just wanted to give a shout out to Molly for her great work and the county for continuing to grow in such leaps and bounds. So Thank you.
Very good. Anything else? I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second by Vice President Burke. Amy, if you would please roll call that too.
Yes, President Plunkett.
Yes.
Vice President Burke,
Yes.
Counselor Choi,
Yes.
Counselor Culp is not present, Counselor Garrett is not present, Counselor Melton,
Yes.
Counselor Trailer.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Motion passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Certainly want to thank everybody for hanging with us. Sometimes these meetings get long. Appreciate everybody's help. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, October 2nd, 2023 at 7 p.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Public notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana Open Door Law. Thank you.